He spoke. Evil listened. Ted Bundy's voice, captured on tape, reveals more than confessions. It echoes with manipulation, charm, and something far darker. This isn't just audio. It's a descent into the mind of a killer who knew exactly what to say, and when to say nothing. He was already sentenced to die. But Ted Bundy had one last move to play. In 1984, while locked away on Florida's death row, Bundy reached out to investigators, not to confess, not torpant, but to offer help. Washington state was being terrorized by a new serial killer. Women were vanishing. Bodies were turning up near rivers, ravines, and wooded trails. The press called him the Green River Killer. The FBI had no leads. Bundy claimed he could see inside the killer's mind. He said he understood the urges, the rituals, the geography, because he had lived them. What followed wasn't a confession. It wasn't redemption. It was a psychological chess match between predator and profiler. This is Dialogue with the Devil. Act 1. The letter. Bundy was no longer the charming law student. He was a convicted murderer, sentenced to die for the brutal killings of dozens of women. But he wasn't done. He sent a letter to Detective Robert Keppel, a man who had helped catch him years earlier. Bundy offered insight into the Green River case. He said he could help build a profile. He claimed to understand the killer's compulsions, his patterns, his geography. Keppel was skeptical, but the case was stalling. And Bundy was offering something no one else could, a window into the mind of a predator. Bundy didn't ask for forgiveness. He asked for relevance. He described how the killer would return to the bodies, how he'd keep trophies, how he'd choose victims based on vulnerability and isolation. Bundy wasn't guessing. He was remembering. Act 2, the tapes Keppel recorded every session. Bundy spoke in third person. He dissected the killer's psychology like a surgeon. He doesn't see them as people. He sees them as objects. Disposable. Replaceable. Bundy described the thrill of control. The calm after the kill. The compulsion to revisit the scene. He explained how the killer would blend in. How he'd appear normal. How he'd manipulate trust. Keppel realized Bundy wasn't just helping. He was performing. He wanted to be seen as brilliant, as essential. Bundy began to withhold information. He demanded more time. He wanted to delay his execution. He wanted power. Keppel played along. He extracted details that shaped the FBI's behavioral profile. Bundy's insights weren't theoretical. They were lived experience. Act 3, the mind of a monster. Bundy described the killer's rituals. The stalking. The fantasy. The escalation. He explained how the killer would rehearse the crime in his mind, long before the first victim vanished. Bundy spoke of the entity, a force he claimed took over. A hunger that couldn't be satisfied. He doesn't kill because he hates. He kills because he needs to. Keppel asked if Bundy was describing himself. Bundy smiled. He never answered directly. He talked about masks, about charm, about how killers wear normalcy like a costume. Bundy wasn't just profiling the Green River Killer. He was narrating his own descent. He described the moment of transformation, when fantasy became action, when control became compulsion, when the killer stopped seeing victims as human. Bundy's words weren't just chilling. They were instructional. Act 4, the game. Bundy's manipulation was precise. He knew investigators were desperate, and he used that desperation to buy time. He offered maps. He offered theories. He offered comparisons to his own crimes. But every offer came with a price. Delay. Attention. Control. Bundy wasn't trying to stop a killer. He was trying to stay relevant. To rewrite his legacy. He wanted to be remembered not just as a monster, but as a mind. He played investigators against each other. He hinted at unsolved cases. He dangled confessions like bait. He used ambiguity as leverage. He knew the system. And he knew how to exploit it. Act 5, the Green River Connection. Bundy's predictions were disturbingly accurate. He said the killer would revisit dump sites, that he'd keep trophies, that he'd choose victims who wouldn't be missed. He described the killer's need for ritual, for control, for escalation. Bundy even suggested the killer might be a truck painter. Someone mobile. Someone invisible. Years later, Gary Ridgway was arrested. He confessed to killing 71 women. He worked as a truck painter. He revisited bodies. He kept trophies. Bundy didn't catch Ridgway, but he helped shape the hunt. And he made sure his voice echoed long after his death. Act 6, The Psychology of Evil. Bundy's behavior in prison revealed more than his crimes. It revealed his pathology. He was narcissistic, calculating, detached. He studied criminology. He read case files. He analyzed other killers. He wanted to be the authority on evil, not just a subject of it. Bundy's interviews became a masterclass in manipulation. He spoke with precision. He used charm as a weapon. He controlled the room. He didn't just want to be remembered. He wanted to be studied. And he was. Psychologists, profilers, and criminologists still dissect his words. Not to understand Bundy, but to understand the darkness he embodied. Bundy wasn't just a killer. He was a mirror, reflecting the worst parts of human nature. Act 7, The Final Hours. As Bundy's execution date approached, he changed tactics. He offered new confessions. He named victims. He gave locations. But it was all conditional. He wanted stays. He wanted delays. He wasn't seeking redemption. He was bargaining. In his final interviews, Bundy blamed pornography. He blamed childhood trauma. He blamed everything but himself. He cried. He begged. He manipulated. But the clock kept ticking. On January 24th, 1989, Bundy was executed. Outside the prison, crowds cheered. They held signs. They celebrated. Inside, Bundy died as he lived, trying to control the narrative. Act 8. The Echo. Bundy's tapes are still studied. Not for justice, but for insight. He showed how killers think, how they rationalize, how they manipulate. Keppel later said Bundy was never truly helping. He was feeding off the attention, off the fear, off the power. Bundy's final act wasn't a confession. It was a seduction. He offered insight but demanded control. He gave answers but played games. He didn't want forgiveness. He wanted immortality. And in many ways, he got it. In the end, the devil spoke. And we listened. Not because he deserved it, but because we needed to understand. What drives a man to kill? What makes him think he's untouchable? And what happens when evil refuses to die quietly? Bundy's voice still echoes. Not in confession, but in calculation. He didn't offer closure. He offered a mirror. And when we look into it, we don't just see him. We see the darkness we're trying to understand.